You can almost smell the lake. Galilee. Dawn light on the water. Nets come up heavy and dripping, hands raw from rope. This isn't a hobby. It's the family business. It's rent and bread and honor. And then a voice cuts through the ordinary. Follow me. Not a lecture. Not a debate. A command that sounds like an invitation. Simon hears it. Andrew hears it. James and John hear it. And the gospel writers make you feel the snap of it. Nets still wet, boats still rocking, partners still watching. They leave. One scene later, you're not on the shoreline anymore. You're in a town where the air is tense. A tax booth sits like a little throne of betrayal. Coins clink. A man named Levi Matthew has a pen in his hand and Rome's permission at his back. Jesus stops. Follow me. And the transaction freezes mid-breath. Because if this man stands up, everyone will notice. The crowd will talk. The old friends will spit. The new friends will demand loyalty. And he stands up. You've read these stories before. But sit in the silence after the words. Feel what it costs. Now ask the unsettling question hidden in plain sight. What if the order of these calls and the way each gospel frames them isn't random memory at all, but a message? What everyone gets wrong is treating these call stories like mere biography. As if the Gospels are saying, here are the names, and moving on. Or as if the differences between Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are just messy recollection. One writer remembered it this way, another wrote it that way. But the Bible actually teaches something sharper. The Gospel authors arrange the call narratives order, pairings, settings, and immediate outcomes to preach discipleship. To reveal authority. And to make you feel the escalating cost of following Jesus. That shoreline scene you pictured? It's not just about fishermen changing careers. It's a staged moment of authority. Jesus doesn't advertise. He doesn't audition disciples. He speaks, and grown men reorganize their entire world around his sentence. Then the tax booth scene isn't just, Jesus was nice to sinners. It's a deliberate public rupture. The writers place the call of a collaborator, a socially radioactive man, right where you can't ignore it. The call creates conflict on purpose. And watch the repeated motifs. There's the immediacy, and immediately they left. The text keeps pressing urgency. There's naming and renaming. Simon becomes Peter. Identity is being rebuilt, not merely redirected. There's authority before full understanding. Jesus appoints and sends people who still don't fully grasp who he is. That's not a mistake in the story. That's the point. Even the lists of apostles, never identical in order, are not meaningless rosters. They're shaped. Peter is consistently first. Judas consistently last. Pairs appear, like companions in a mission. So the revelation is this. The call narratives are an embedded curriculum. The authors are telling you what kind of follower Jesus creates, what kind of kingdom he's inaugurating, and how delegated authority is born not from status, but from surrender. But to see it clearly, you have to step back into their world and feel what follow really meant. Once you feel the dust under their sandals, the small details start sounding like thunder. Fishing in Galilee wasn't a lone man with a rod. It was a network: boats, nets, hired hands, partners, contracts, and family expectation. When the Gospels say James and John left their father Zebedee in the boat, that's not a sentimental line. In an honor-shame culture, leaving your father's side could look like dishonor. It could fracture a household economy. Nets weren't just tools, they were livelihood. Then look at the tax booth. A tax collector wasn't simply bad with money. He was tied to Rome's system, often collecting tolls and taxes that reminded everyone who really held power. That's why the word tax collector carries social stigma in the text. Eating with one could stain your reputation. Calling one as a disciple was a public choice. And then there's the zealot, Simon the Zealot, in the lists. The term points to fervor, a nationalist fire that could spill into violent resistance. Whether Simon was formally part of an organized movement or simply marked by that zeal, the label signals danger. This is a man with a cause. Now add the most overlooked piece. In the first-century rabbi-disciple pattern, students usually sought out the teacher. They attached themselves to a rabbi. But in the Gospels, Jesus reverses it. He chooses. He summons. He defines the relationship. And apostle isn't just advanced student. The Greek word is apostolos *. It means sent one, an authorized representative. Like an envoy who carries the sender's message and authority, not his own. So, they left their nets, he left the booth, he left his father, aren't poetic flourishes. They're the concrete price of being reassigned under a new authority. And that raises a deeper question. If the cost is this real at the beginning, why do the gospel writers place certain calls next to certain conflicts as if the arrangement itself is teaching you how authority works? You start noticing the pattern when you stop reading the calls as scattered anecdotes and hear them as a composed argument. Mark, for example, clusters the fishermen early Simon and Andrew, then James and John, and he repeats the same pulse. Jesus speaks, and they respond, immediately. That word matters. Mark isn't giving you a timeline as much as a tempo. The kingdom arrives with urgency, and the first disciples embody that urgency. Then comes the disruptive inclusion, Levi the tax collector. And what's attached to his call? A table, a meal, fellowship that sparks scandal. The narrative often moves like this: call, right pointing arrow, demonstration of authority, teaching, healing, exorcism, right pointing arrow, conflict with religious leaders. The calls aren't isolated, they're stitched into a rising confrontation. Even Luke, who expands the scenes, does it with purpose. He turns the fisherman call into an overwhelming catch of fish, and then places Peter's confession of unworthiness right there. Depart from me, for I am a sinful man. The miracle isn't just power, it's revelation. It exposes the man being called. Now listen to the grammar in key moments. In Matthew chapter 4 and Mark 1, the follow command is immediate, and the response is immediate. The stories are built like command and response liturgy. Jesus speaks, a life moves. Then come the lists. They're not carbon copies, but they're not random. Peter is consistently first, often named with prominence. Judas is consistently last, marked as the betrayer. The 12 are frequently presented in pairs, echoing how Jesus later sends them out 2 by 2. So the differences between gospel orderings aren't chaos. They're theological shaping. Each author is placing the apostles like stones in a pattern, showing you that discipleship is not mere admiration. It's allegiance under authority, tested in public. But the pattern goes even deeper. Why would Jesus grant delegated authority to people before they understand him and keep them close even when they fail? You can now see the cost, and you can see the structure. But there's still a missing link. Why the Gospels emphasize authority given so early, and why the order of the calls quietly predicts the later betrayals and restorations. Because in the Gospels, Jesus doesn't wait for clarity before he creates commission. The call comes first. The understanding comes later. That's not sloppy storytelling, it's discipleship theology. Jesus says, "Follow me," and then he makes followers by walking with them, correcting them, exposing them, restoring them. In other words, the call isn't a reward for maturity. It's the beginning of transformation. And notice how quickly follow turns into sent. The 12 aren't merely students collecting notes. They're being formed into witnesses. In Mark and Luke, Jesus appoints them to be with him and to send them out. That order matters. Presence precedes platform. Relationship precedes representation. Delegated authority is never detached from proximity to Jesus. Now the deeper layer. The Gospels repeatedly show authority operating through weakness. Peter is named first in the lists and often speaks first in the stories, yet the same Peter misunderstands, rebukes Jesus, denies Jesus. Judas is placed last, consistently marked as betrayer, yet he was called the same way, walked the same roads, heard the same teaching. The structure won't let you romanticize the apostles. Their authority is derivative, and their hearts are exposed under that authority. Even renaming works like a prophetic sign. Simon becomes Peter, rock, before he ever looks like one. That's the pattern. Jesus declares an identity, then discipleship becomes the long, costly process of becoming what he named. And the cost escalates on purpose. First, leaving work, then leaving reputation. Think of Levi's table and the scandal it creates. Then leaving illusions when the Messiah refuses their categories. Then leaving safety when following Jesus places them in conflict with powers that do not negotiate. So the authorial intent is not simply, "Here are the men." It's, "Here is how the kingdom forms its representatives," called by sovereign initiative, authorized under accountability, and trained through costly proximity to Jesus. And once that pattern is in your hands, the call narratives stop being museum pieces and start functioning like a mirror held up to every claim of discipleship and every claim of authority. The hidden structure isn't there to impress you with literary craft. It's there to press you with a person. The Gospels arrange the calls so you can't miss what discipleship really is. Jesus steps into ordinary places and speaks with kingdom authority. People move. Identities shift. Tables become battlefields. Nets, booths, reputations, even dreams of greatness, everything gets reordered around him. And in the middle of it, the paradox stands tall. The ones he calls are not polished. They're exposed, renamed before they're ready, sent while they're still learning to trust. That's not accidental. It reveals the kind of king Jesus is. He doesn't recruit helpers to build his brand. He creates witnesses to carry his word. Which means the weight of the call is also the mercy of the call. If Jesus is the one who initiates, then you're not held by your resume. If Jesus is the one who authorizes, then authority is never possession, it's stewardship under his voice. And if Jesus is the one who restores, then failure is not the final word, but neither is it hidden. It becomes part of the training ground where the kingdom makes its servants. The call narratives, arranged so carefully, are telling one resonant truth. Following Jesus is not an add-on to life, it is the new center of life, because he has the right to be. If this kind of reading opened something for you, there's more depth like this waiting. How each gospel's ordering of the 12 reinforces its portrait of Jesus and his kingdom. And you're invited to stay close for that by subscribing for more biblical clarity that shows what was hidden in the text all along.